She was also in the movie Kohinoor from 1970 something, late 70s.
Hold on a second. Excuse me. You're not Tom.
Sylvia Miles, well known for plenty of movies. Just the crowd before her eulogy. November 21, 2019.
Cards. That's so perfect because Sylvia was a 3D person. In fact, she was in Sensurround. She was IMAX. I'm going to speak, and we have other speakers. We also have film clips. And at the end of the event, we can all retire to the side room for refreshments. It's a party. Sylvia liked parties. Sylvia Miles was one of my first celebrities. In 1977, I was fascinated with her, and I convinced the editors at a fan magazine that I worked for to let me interview her. I read about her in the columns all the time, and I loved that Sylvia had famously dumped a plate of pasta on critic John Simon's head.
So let's get this going. So, my family, first of all, would like to thank Film at Lincoln Center for kindly a press screening for the movie Heat. Oh. I had just graduated from college where I'd majored in theater and acting, and it was absolutely thrilling to be in a movie theater sitting next to the leading lady, an Oscar-nominated actress, and watching a movie that none of the other students in my school had yet to see. When the movie was over and the lights came up, something even more thrilling happened. The person sitting directly in front of me stood up, turned around, and my heart went zing. It was Tennessee Williams. So Sylvia and Tennessee greeted one another warmly, exchanged a few words about the movie, and then Sylvia introduced me to him. She said, "Tennessee, I'd like you to meet my niece from Queens." She always introduced me like that. "This is my niece from Queens." And we all knew exactly how she felt about Queens. So there we were, it was the summer of 1972, and Tennessee looks at Sylvia, and then he looks at me, and then he looks back at Sylvia, and he says, "Well, Sylvia, I had no idea you even had a family." I think that pretty much sums up how most people saw Sylvia Miles. She was a mythical goddess, not unlike Aphrodite, who emerged from the sea fully grown. One day she magically appeared at the shore of Manhattan Island, and there she was, Sylvia Miles, star and goddess. But unlike Aphrodite, she was actually born of mortals. And in the far reaches of her hall closet, banned to Siberia, on the top shelf behind all her screenplays, all her playbills, all of her collected income tax returns from 1972 through 2017, I found a box, a treasure trove. It contained her autograph albums, her baby photos, photos of her parents, her grandparents, her 3 husbands, her family, with a capital F. So your Sylvia Miles was my Aunt Sylvia, my complicated aunt. And I loved her, and I will miss her sorely. Thank you.
And how are you? And I thought, for an incredible genius, this man doesn't speak very much. And then I read the diaries. He spoke a lot to Pat Hackett, including about Sylvia Miles. So Pat Hackett is now going to tell us what Andy Warhol said about Sylvia.
To give an idea of the ongoing relationship between Andy and Sylvia, first I'll read just a few of his diary entries that she figures in. May 18th, 1980, went to Linda Stein's party. Sylvia Miles was there and she said, "You've got to hear my songs." She'd made a record and I said, "Oh, gee, yeah, sure, I can't wait." And she said, "You don't have to. I've got them right here in my bag." July 8th, 1985. Over the weekend, I saw an old episode of Naked City. I think we just saw a still from it. From the early 1960s on TV that had Sylvia Miles and Dennis Hopper. And it was during the filming of this episode that I first met Dennis, when Henry Geldzahler took me up to 128th Street on the East Side where they were shooting it. And since Sylvia was in the episode, she must have been there that day too, but I didn't know her then. And she had to be only 40, and she was playing old whores already. July 17th, 1985. Ran into Sylvia Miles, and I told her that we really had to go together to the opening of Marianne Hinton's Trompe l'Oeil Gallery show this coming Tuesday, because it's called Opening of a Loo. So then Sylvia and I can both finally say that we've been to the opening of a toilet. Now the next final example, just for context, Andy was having one of those days when he was feeling depressed. He felt like his friends were losing interest in him, that they were being, to use his word, distant. October 2nd, 1986. I took Sam Bolton, to the Whitney Museum party for Keith and Kenny, Keith Haring and Kenny Sharp, that I was hosting. Keith asked me what big movie stars I was bringing. He gave me a hint and said that Nick Rhodes was in town, and I knew that. And I don't know why Nick hasn't called me. He's been here a while. He's being distant. Got to the Whitney early, had to do some press. Some of the museum people were there, but Tom Armstrong, the director, wasn't. Later he said he hadn't come down because he was upstairs hanging sergeants, another distant person. And Cornelia was there, Cornelia Guest, and she was distant.
Pistachio. Sorry, the joke just has a million lives to it. Now, when I was growing up, because I'm going to make all these...
I don't have a lot of the stories that Michael Musto has and that her niece has, but I'm pleased to take part in this tribute to Sylvia. I first met Sylvia when I interviewed her way back in 1960, when she was appearing as Marlise in a stunning production of Jean Genet's renowned play, The Balcony. It was at the Circle in the Square Theater then. She gave a striking performance as in Genet's bordello that stood as a metaphor for society. And in addition, I was struck by how absolutely beautiful Sylvia was, as well as extremely talented as an actress. And when we talked, she was full of enthusiasm about acting that she kept throughout her life. And she had many other impressive stage credits that followed The Balcony, but it was in film, of course, and also on television that Sylvia became best known. What was particularly fascinating about her acting was that she didn't need much screen time to make an impression. Just think about that. In Midnight Cowboy in 1969, for which she received the Oscar nomination that everybody remembers for Best Supporting Actress, she was on screen for 6 minutes, playing Cass, a Park Avenue woman colorfully described by the British Guardian critic as a prospective sugar mommy. In 1975, Farewell My Lovely, in which she played Mrs. Jessie Florian, in which she won her second Best Supporting Actress nomination, her screen time was 8 minutes. So Sylvia didn't need many minutes to show her acting prowess, and the casting directors knew this, the ones that she had to harangue, as we just heard, for getting new jobs. If I enumerated all the list of stage, film, and television credits, I would be standing here before you the entire afternoon. You've seen a lot of the examples of the films as we've been talking here this morning. But just to cite a few, she played Dolores, the feisty real estate broker in the 1987 Wall Street, and she did a reprise of that role in the 2010 Wall Street Money Never Sleeps. I can still see Sylvia as this real estate broker, and I can hear that voice in my head, and I've thought of it many, many times. My wife happens to be a real estate broker, so we always discuss different portrayals.
Hello, anybody home?
That voice, that hair. Sylvia was everywhere you wanted to be. When you walked into a room and you saw Sylvia Miles, you knew you were at the place that you wanted to be. You knew you were where it was at.
Hi. I'll tell you how I met Sylvia. In 1987, 1988, I was casting something, a character in play off Broadway. And the name of it was Phyllis Stein. And her name, get it, Phyllis Stein. And her name came up, and the producer, who she had known for decades, did not want to see her. And the playwright insisted. And so begrudgingly, the producer said, okay. And the day of the audition, or the day before the audition, he canceled the rehearsal room because he thought it wasn't worth the money. And he said the audition would be in his office. And it was a small office, and she came in, and she gave one hell of an audition. And he was scowling during it. And in the middle of it, in a scene where she was crying, where she was reading with a talent-free stage manager, and really putting out, she broke in the middle of her tears, and she's turned directly to the producer, and she said, I know you hate me, I know I'm not gonna get this job, but I still wanna do my best. And that's how I met her.
Thank you, Michael. You couldn't call her when she was watching Shark Tank. And if you visited, you were the bull in the china shop. There was always a lot of chiding, but that was she, Sylvia. She was a character, yes, and a broad, obsessed with fame and vulnerable. When someone was a big star as Sylvia was, you felt as though you'd known her forever. But I first talked to Sylvia at a birthday party for the poet Ira Cohen. When she told me she was a chess player and had even played with Bobby Fischer, I invited her home for a match with Bob, my husband. And she came, swanning by mirrors, proclaiming that everyone everyone had aged except for her. While she was a little rusty at chess, and there was never a rematch, that was the start of a decades-long friendship. Sylvia was a friend who got under your bones, dispensing wisdom whether or not you asked. Not motherly, more like a divine oracle. Intuitive in art and life, she, sizing me up, would talk about dedication to art, how you can't spread it out. Just look at the sacrifices she made. Married 3 times by the time she was 25, an exaggeration I have come to learn. She never had children. Yet whatever troubles I was having with kids or career, she had one word for me: sacrifice. And she was always right. It was not a surprise when she said her true vocation was to give sermons. One year, for her annual homemade Christmas card, she fashioned herself as the Pope. Of course, many of her proclamations seemed outlandish. If another actress got a part that she could have played, she would explain that she was too big and would take attention away from the lead. Or the director was a self-hating Jew who only put shiksas in Semitic roles. You know I'm right, she would say. I always tell you the truth. It was wise not to argue. A character as she was generous and endearing. In these last years, she had an army of loving friends taking care of her. One time, after she let me know she loved Carre's crackers, the whole wheat ones that eat like cookies, I brought her a box. Opening the cupboard as she instructed me, I saw no fewer than 30 boxes.
I really feel very honored to be here to speak about my friend Sylvia Miles, who was a mentor to me. She's a member of the Actors Studio, which I am. My brother is a director, Marty Freed, took me to the studio one day and pointed her out and said, "Marilyn, get to know that woman." And I said, "Why?" "Just get to know that woman." So I did. And I found out how self-taught, how well-read, how self-educated, how giving, and who used to yell at me all the time because I didn't read that book. I read that book last year. I'm way ahead of you, Marilyn. I can't read all those books. Go to the library. Get a library card. Carry a book and read. Educate yourself. Expand your world. Get to know things that you've never known before. I got 2 stories, and I'll make it short. I miss her terribly. I used to call her at least 3 times a week. And I remember having a conversation with her. And you know, Sylvie, listen, I gotta tell you, don't call me in the afternoon. Because I get telephone calls from California. And they're big producers. And I gotta talk to them. And I can't talk to you in the afternoon, call me after 6 o'clock. I said, okay. So I call her, and she talks. And she talks. And I say, uh-huh, uh-huh, okay, all right, that's good, uh-huh, yeah, 45 minutes later, uh-huh. I said, okay, that's great, Sylvie. I get up, I go to the kitchen, I make a cup of tea, I come back. So anyway, I said to him, and I said, uh-huh. She didn't even know I went to the kitchen to make tea. I was gone about 7 minutes. Last time I walked up 8th Avenue, there was an art house. And there was a marquee. And I was on my way to Sylvia because she had found some more books for me to read. Oh, she was so great. To sit down and talk to Sylvie about the world and what she's read, her understanding of human life. You know, it's fun to see her going to parties, but the other side, she opened a world for me. Books, read, understand what's going on in the world.
Mauricio Padilla for organizing this incredible event, including the slideshow, the entrance theme, which was for a terrible Carol Baker movie called Sylvia, and the 3D art piece with the glasses. Thank you, Mauricio. I have to pronounce this next speaker's name correctly. I'm Italian and so is he, and it's George Abagnale. He's from the Warhol factory. He's a writer and an actor. George Abagnale.
Miles loved the Three Stooges. She loved to do imitations of Jimmy Durante. And she loved very silly jokes. I'm going to tell you one of her favorites. She first told this joke to Andrea Feldman, the actress with whom she worked in the film Heat. And Andrea Feldman also loved very silly jokes. This is it.
Did you hear about the guy who goes into the Chinese restaurant? He goes up to the Chinese man behind the counter, he takes out a gun, and he says, "Give me all your money."
And the Chinese man behind the counter says, "To take out?" One of Sylvia's favorites. I always admired the pride that Sylvia had in her work. With me, she was never a show-off, and she was never conceited. She would never talk about the pride she had in her work unless I brought up the excellence of one of her performances. So once I was talking about her role in Midnight Cowboy, and I said, "Sylvia, the audience was so upset by the brevity of your role. They wanted you to stay on that screen longer." And she said, "I was in Midnight Cowboy for 6 minutes. I took a 6-minute role and I turned it into an Academy Award nomination." About to see Sylvia Miles give a performance that is going to knock your socks off. And you are going to see the most beautiful breasts that you have ever seen in your life. When the film was over, my father turned to me and he said, "Son, my socks have been knocked off." And I saw the most beautiful breasts I have ever seen in my life. It was years later when I told Sylvia about that little exchange between my father and me. And she said nothing. She beamed. And then she gave me that big, beautiful smile and that wonderful little laugh. I loved Sylvia Miles, and I'm so happy to be here today to celebrate her life. Thank you so much.
I told this story to Marilyn Freed, so she told me, "You really have to tell it," because Sylvia was always devoted to the actor's studio. And one day after the session, I was walking out with Harvey Keitel and Sylvia, and Harvey was saying how when it took him 9 times to audition. In those days, you had to pass, the actor's studio was headed by Lee Strasberg, Elia Kazan, and they had, a lot of other people on the board that judged. So Sylvia said it was her 9th audition, that she was going to do a scene from Golden Boy, which was a Clifford Odets play, who was also somewhat related to the Actors Studio because he was from the group theater, which is what the Actors Studio emanated from.
So Golden Boy, the play is about a boxer, a musician who becomes a boxer, and he's in love with this woman. And they have this scene, it's a famous audition scene, where it's an...
If you could believe this, they played nurses. Vega, please come tell us about Sylvia.
On the early morning of my first day shooting on the set of Critical Condition in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was waiting for the elevator. I was supposed to go down for hair and makeup. As the elevator doors finally opened, out walks a woman with a head of wild blonde hair. She was wearing these very strange black boots and a black tutu and black leather gloves that she kept waving in the air. Well, the moment she spoke, I recognized her wonderful raspy voice that all of us here have come to know for decades. That moment was my very first introduction to Sylvia Miles. It was also the morning that gave birth to decades of a long friendship with her, a friendship that has meant so much to me over the years. Well, we all know that Sylvia had a terrific, dry sense of humor. Sylvia and Tennessee Williams were walking down Fifth Avenue on a lovely spring day in the late 1970s, and an extremely well-dressed woman was heading their direction. As Sylvia took notice of her, she stopped for a moment and then pulled Tennessee over and whispered in his ears, "Here comes anorexia nervosa." Tennessee turns. "Why, Sylvia, you know everyone in New York." Sylvia, forever in my heart. You are my golden star. I'm sorry. She was the most wonderful human being I've ever met.
Pop another Advil. And then we can move on to our lithium ice cream. Andrea Brown, are you here? And Michael Berg, are you here? So let's have Andrea Brown, a close friend of Sylvia's.
First, I have one correction. I'd just like to note that Stuart Freeman, Sylvia's good friend and artist, is the one responsible for the 3D card, and I didn't want that to go unnoticed. The other thing I have to explain is Sylvia always maintained that she met myself and Shelley Shipper at the exact same time. So anytime she was invited somewhere, she had to bring both of us because she couldn't decide. That wasn't exactly accurate, but that's the story. We're sticking to it. We're going to keep it that way, but Shelley will come up in many of the stories. There's not many, a few of the stories that I'm about to tell. I met Sylvia in 2006 when my good friend Doug Keston, who was also her agent, asked if he could bring Sylvia to watch the Golden Globes because her TV was too small and she didn't get cable even though they weren't on cable or whatever. But anyway, she came in 2006 and I remember that because in 2007, on the day of the Golden Globes, I was in the hospital recovering from bilateral knee surgery. But Sylvia called and didn't understand why that should interfere with her coming to Shelley's apartment to watch the Golden Globes. So Shelley left me in the hospital and went to her apartment to open the door for Sylvia and Doug to come and watch the Golden Globes, which became a tradition up until the end. So the first time Shelley and I went to her apartment, we had to walk like this, but she proudly wanted to show us her apartment and all of her things, but she seemingly was apologizing for all the stuff at the same time. So to make her feel at ease, I said, "Sylvia, I completely understand. Though my apartment is smaller, I too have filled every nook and cranny with something that could either be used as a costume for one of my dances, or a prop, or something I absolutely can't live without." Sylvia took a long pause. She put on her glasses, peered over them at me and said, I mean, I don't want to insult you, but people actually care about my things. So that pretty much summed up our relationship. What could you do but laugh, exactly. So sometime later, she took Shelley and I out to lunch, and during the conversation, Shelley said, tell Sylvia about the fire. I said, I'm waiting for the fire because that's the only way I'm going to be released from my possessions. It was at that moment Sylvia realized that we were indeed two of a kind, burdened by our possessions, which she famously called her archives. It's not that I care about you. I just don't want to be splattered by the blood when the bus hits you. And that's what the crowd on the corner did. They burst into laughter. When Sylvia was invited to a fancy Halloween party, although she was only allowed one guest, of course she invited Shelley and myself. No. She called the woman and insisted that we be added to the list. She graciously agreed. Though it was a sit-down dinner for 250 people, she allowed us to come. So then the next thing was, what costume should I wear? Obviously, I have a lot of costumes in every nook and cranny of my apartment, but my mind kept coming back, I should go as Sylvia. But you never know how that's going to turn out. So I put on basically what I was going to wear. Sylvia had given me some jewelry, and I had a very sexy leotard top, and she had given Shelley her gloves, and we attended a few events where she wore a top hat. There was a picture of it a couple times, and of course the glasses. So I sent a picture to Doug Heston, her agent, and said, what do you think? He said, I think she'll like it, but you never know. So I said, all right, let me think about it. I bravely decided to go as Sylvia Miles with Sylvia Miles to the party. So as I walked into the lobby of her apartment, I hear this loud New York accent saying, oh my God, I thought I was looking at myself. You look just like me. Then she grabbed, I see her covering your ears. That's sort of the result of Sylvia. She grabbed her doorman and said, look, she came as me. She didn't tell me. So as we walked to the car, she was stopping complete strangers on the street saying, I'm a movie star, and she came as me. So they were like, great. So I was happy because I said, oh, my costume is a complete success, or so I thought. I couldn't wait to get to the party where everyone knew Sylvia, because they would surely love my costume. As soon as we entered, she said, go over to my friend Carmen and ask her who you came as. So I did, and Carmen was stumped. She had no idea. So I went and stood next to Sylvia. Still nothing, so we had to tell her. Unfortunately, that was not an isolated incident. Nobody really got it, which was kind of amazing to me also, because we looked exactly alike. And so Sylvia was really annoyed, and she just was like, these people are freaking morons! You look just like me! So she went away. We were laughing hysterically over that. And then some people started to figure it out. But just then, Sylvia came back to me. She's like, well, you can forget about winning the $20,000 prize. Carmen is the judge. Exactly. So the only judge I cared about was Sylvia. She loved it and was flattered beyond belief. We had a great time, and I'm so happy to have these memories. So
thank you. This is a beautiful memorial. I want to thank everyone who worked hard for it. Sylvia certainly deserves it. I didn't really want to tell my Sylvia stories because everybody has so many. I wasn't really going to speak when I was asked to, because I thought Sylvia has a lifetime of friends, you know, in the arts and in acting and everywhere. And my stories would not really be as interesting as their stories. And then this little voice came to me that, said, Michael, go, you might get a job. And, which is the way she would preface every party or event or screening that we went to was, oh, Michael, let's go, we might get a job. And, one time she said to me, she said, I don't think I ever got any jobs going to parties, but it gets me out of the house. I wanted to read just a few things from an interview I found of Tennessee Williams. She is very much like me. She is determined to be heard and to matter and to be seen. Unlike me, she is unafraid to be seen haggling for the light, for the center of attention. Sylvia, you must understand, should not be underestimated. She knows what lies beneath the rocks before she lifts them. There are the awards and the nominations and the column inches